Welcome to Midnight Murmur. Here, the night comes alive with chilling tales and spine-tingling stories. If you crave the thrill of the unknown and the eerie whisper of the supernatural, you've found your new haunt. Join us as we dive into the darkest corners of the human mind, unraveling short horror stories that will keep you up at night. Hit that subscribe button, turn off the lights, and let the murmur begin. The shadow of Hollow Creek. In the desolate heart of the Appalachian Mountains, there lay a forgotten town called Hollow Creek. Once a thriving mining town, it had been abandoned for decades, its buildings left to the merciless encroachment of nature. Hollow Creek's history was stained with tales of unexplained disappearances and eerie occurrences, but one story stood out above the rest. A story that had been whispered around campfires for generations, chilling the bones of those brave enough to listen. The legend spoke of a creature known as the Shadow, a malevolent entity that roamed the woods surrounding Hollow Creek. No one knew its origins, but its presence was undeniable. The Shadow was said to appear on the darkest of nights, its form indistinguishable from the blackness around it, save for the gleaming red eyes that burned with an unnatural hunger. It was a cold October night when a group of 5 college friends, Tom, Sarah, Mike, Emily, and Jake, decided to explore Hollow Creek. They were thrill seekers, drawn by the allure of the unknown and the promise of an unforgettable experience. Armed with flashlights, camping gear, and a healthy dose of skepticism, they set out on what they believed would be an exhilarating adventure. The hike to Hollow Creek was uneventful, filled with laughter and teasing as the friends made their way through the dense forest. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. By the time they reached the outskirts of the town, the moon hung high in the sky, casting a ghostly glow over the crumbling buildings. Setting up camp in the town square, the group built a fire and shared stories to ward off the growing chill. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows on the decrepit facades around them. As the night deepened, an unsettling silence fell over the town. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Suddenly, Sarah froze, her eyes fixed on the edge of the firelight. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "See what?" Tom asked, glancing around nervously. "Over there, by the old church," she replied, pointing towards a decaying building partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. The group peered into the darkness, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Mike laughed, attempting to lighten the mood. "Come on, Sarah. It's just your imagination." But Sarah was insistent. "I know what I saw. It was like a shadow, but it moved against the light." Emily shivered and moved closer to the fire. "Maybe it's time to go to bed. We've had enough scares for one night." Reluctantly, the group agreed and retreated to their tents. The fire burned low, casting feeble light as the friends settled in for the night. But sleep did not come easily. Every creak and rustle seemed amplified, every gust of wind a whisper of something sinister. Tom was the first to wake, roused by a faint sound outside his tent. He unzipped the flap and peered into the darkness. The fire had died out, leaving the campsite shrouded in an impenetrable blackness. He strained his ears, trying to identify the noise. A low growl echoed through the night, sending a shiver down Tom's spine. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the tent, his breath visible in the frigid air. He scanned the area, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. "Hello?" he called out softly. "Is anyone there?" There was no response, only the oppressive silence pressing in from all sides. He turned to head back to his tent, but froze in his tracks. There, just beyond the reach of his flashlight, were 2 gleaming red eyes, staring at him with a malevolent intelligence. Tom's heart raced as he backed away, the flashlight trembling in his hand. The eyes followed his every move, and the growl grew louder, more menacing. He turned and ran, shouting for his friends. "Guys, wake up. There's something out here." The camp erupted in chaos as the others scrambled out of their tents, disoriented and frightened. The flashlight beams crisscrossed in the darkness, but the red eyes were gone. "Tom, what happened?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. "It was the shadow," Tom said, panting. "It's real. We need to get out of here, now." Panic set in as the friends hurriedly packed their gear, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. The sense of being watched was overwhelming, the darkness pressing in on them from all sides. As they made their way towards the trail, the air grew colder, and an unnatural fog began to roll in, obscuring their path. The flashlight beams were swallowed by the mist, reducing visibility to mere feet. The feeling of dread intensified with every step, the forest closing in around them like a living entity. Without warning, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. Emily was gone, her flashlight lying abandoned on the ground. The group called out for her, their voices trembling with fear, but there was no answer. "Keep moving," Tom urged. "We can't stay here." One by one, the friends disappeared into the fog, their screams cut short as the shadow claimed them. Tom and Sarah were the last ones left, their breaths ragged and their bodies trembling with fear. "We have to keep going," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. But Tom knew it was hopeless. The shadow was toying with them, drawing out their fear, savoring their terror. He could feel its presence closing in, the red eyes burning into his soul. In the end, there was no escape. The fog swallowed them whole, and the shadow claimed its final victims. The town of Hollow Creek remained silent, the legend of the shadow growing ever darker with each passing year. The next group of thrill-seekers would find no trace of Tom, Sarah, Mike, Emily, or Jake. Only the lingering sense of malevolence that pervaded the air. Hollow Creek had claimed them, as it had so many before, and the shadow continued to wait, hungry for its next prey. The lurking presence. Nestled on the outskirts of a small town in Maine stood the old Carrington Manor, a dilapidated mansion with a sinister reputation. The locals avoided it, whispering tales of the strange occurrences that had plagued the house for over a century. Lights flickering in empty rooms, ghostly figures appearing in windows, and eerie sounds echoing through the halls were just a few of the reports that had turned Carrington Manor into a place of fear and superstition. Despite the warnings, the allure of uncovering the truth about the manor was too strong for a group of friends. Alex, Sam, Maria, and Jess. They were avid ghost hunters, always seeking out the next big thrill, and Carrington Manor was their ultimate challenge. Armed with cameras, recording devices, and a mixture of excitement and apprehension, they set out one chilly October evening to spend the night in the haunted mansion. The journey to the manor was uneventful, the friends' laughter and banter echoing through the woods. But as they reached the imposing iron gates of Carrington Manor, a heavy silence fell over them. The mansion loomed ahead, its broken windows and sagging roof giving it a menacing appearance. "This is it," Alex said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Let's get inside and set up." The friends pushed open the creaking front door and stepped into the grand foyer. Dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights, and the air was thick with the musty scent of decay. The walls were lined with faded portraits, their eyes seeming to follow the intruders as they moved deeper into the house. Sam set up their base camp in the living room, arranging the equipment on a dusty old table. "We'll cover more ground if we split up," he suggested. "Jess and I will take the upstairs. Alex, you and Maria check out the ground floor." The group agreed and went their separate ways, their footsteps echoing ominously through the empty halls. Alex and Maria began their exploration in the dining room, where a long, dust-covered table stood as a silent reminder of the grand dinners once held there. "This place gives me the creeps," Maria admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex nodded, scanning the room with his flashlight. "Yeah, but that's what we're here for, right? Let's see if we can capture anything on the cameras." As they set up their recording equipment, a sudden chill swept through the room, causing both friends to shiver. Alex frowned. "Did you feel that?" Maria nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "It felt like someone just walked through me." Meanwhile, upstairs, Jess and Sam were having their own unsettling experiences. They had just finished setting up a camera in one of the bedrooms when they heard a faint whispering sound. "Did you hear that?" Jess asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Yeah," Sam replied, his voice tense. "It's coming from down the hall." They followed the sound, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, and seemed to be coming from a room at the end of the corridor. As they reached the door, it swung open on its own, revealing a shadowy figure standing in the center of the room. Jess gasped, and Sam took a step back. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The figure didn't respond, but its eyes glowed with an eerie light. Jess raised her camera, but before she could take a picture, the figure vanished, leaving the room in complete silence. Back downstairs, Alex and Maria had finished setting up their equipment and were exploring the library when they heard a loud crash from the hallway. They rushed out to investigate, only to find a large mirror shattered on the floor. "Did you see anyone?" Maria asked, her voice shaking. Alex shook his head, his heart pounding in his chest. "No, it must have fallen on its own." As they turned to go back to the library, the temperature dropped suddenly, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the hallway. Alex and Maria froze, their eyes wide with terror. "That didn't sound like the house settling," Maria whispered, clutching Alex's arm. Before Alex could respond, a cold, invisible force grabbed him and threw him against the wall. Maria screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of malicious laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Upstairs, Jess and Sam heard the commotion and rushed down to find Alex slumped against the wall, gasping for breath, and Maria crying uncontrollably. "What happened?" Sam asked, helping Alex to his feet. "Something attacked us," Alex managed to say, his voice weak. "We need to get out of here." The friends hurriedly gathered their equipment and made their way to the front door, but it slammed shut before they could reach it. The temperature in the foyer plummeted, and the air grew thick with an oppressive presence. "Please, let us go," Jess shouted, banging on the door. The laughter returned, louder and more malevolent. The friends huddled together, their fear palpable. Suddenly, the portraits on the walls began to change, the faces twisting into grotesque, mocking visages. "There's no escape," a deep, disembodied voice echoed through the room. "You are mine now." Panic set in, and the friends frantically tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder still, and they could see their breaths forming in front of them. The oppressive presence closed in, and they felt a suffocating weight pressing down on them. In a last desperate attempt, Sam grabbed a heavy candlestick and smashed a window, creating a narrow escape route. The friends clambered through the broken glass, cutting themselves in their haste to get out. They ran through the woods, the laughter following them, echoing in their minds long after they had reached the safety of the town. They never spoke of that night again, the terror too great to relive. Carrington Manor remained abandoned, its secrets buried in the shadows. But the friends knew that the house was not empty. The presence that lurked within was always watching, always waiting for its next victims, ready to pull them into the darkness where they would be lost forever. The shadow in the attic. In the quiet town of Haverhill, Massachusetts, stood an old Victorian house that had long been the subject of local folklore. Known as the Gardner House, it had been abandoned for decades, its once grand facade now decayed and covered in ivy. The townspeople whispered of strange lights in the windows at night, eerie sounds emanating from within, and the unsettling feeling that something malevolent resided in the attic. No one dared to enter, except for a group of curious teenagers, Tom, Lisa, Jake, and Emma. One chilly November evening, the friends decided to explore the Gardner house. Armed with flashlights, a camera, and a healthy dose of skepticism, they approached the looming structure. The moonlight cast long shadows across the yard, and the wind rustled the overgrown foliage, creating an eerie symphony. Tom, the unofficial leader, pushed open the creaking front door. "Come on, guys. Let's see if we can find anything spooky." The air inside was musty and cold, filled with the scent of damp wood and decay. Cobwebs hung in thick clusters from the ceiling, and dust coated every surface. The friends moved cautiously through the rooms, their footsteps echoing through the empty house. "This place is seriously creepy," Emma whispered, her eyes wide with apprehension. "That's the point, isn't it?" Jake replied with a nervous chuckle. "Let's check out the attic. That's where all the stories come from." They found the narrow staircase leading up to the attic, its wooden steps creaking ominously under their weight. At the top of the stairs, they were met with a heavy, padlocked door. Tom produced a set of old lock-picking tools he had borrowed from his uncle, and after a few tense minutes, the lock clicked open. The door swung inward with a groan, revealing a dark, dusty space. The attic was filled with old furniture covered in sheets, stacks of yellowed newspapers, and boxes of forgotten belongings. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, and something acrid and unsettling. "Let's spread out and look around," Tom suggested, switching on his flashlight. The friends cautiously moved through the cluttered space, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Lisa paused by an old rocking chair, its seat worn and tattered. She reached out to touch it, and as she did, the chair began to rock slowly on its own. "Guys, look at this," she whispered, backing away in fear. The others gathered around, their flashlights illuminating the chair. It continued to rock back and forth, the creaking sound growing louder. Suddenly, the temperature in the attic plummeted, and their breath became visible in the freezing air. "This isn't funny," Emma said, her voice trembling. "We should leave." Tom nodded, but before they could move, a loud thud echoed from the far corner of the attic. They turned their flashlights towards the sound, revealing a large, dusty mirror leaning against the wall. The surface was cracked and clouded, but something seemed to move within its depths. "Did you see that?" Jake asked, stepping closer. "See what?" Tom replied, his voice tense. "Something moved in the mirror," Jake insisted. They all stared at the mirror, the beam of their flashlights dancing across its surface. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a shadowy figure appeared, its shape indistinct, but undeniably human. The figure's eyes glowed with a sinister light, and a malicious grin spread across its face. "Get out!" A deep, guttural voice echoed through the attic, sending chills down their spines. The friends backed away, their hearts pounding in their chests. The figure in the mirror moved closer, its eyes locked onto them. As it reached the edge of the glass, it began to claw its way out, its shadowy fingers stretching towards them. "Run!" Tom shouted, and they bolted for the stairs. As they descended the steps, the house seemed to come alive around them. The walls shook, doors slammed, and a cacophony of whispers filled the air. They stumbled through the dark hallways, their flashlights flickering, the malevolent presence hot on their heels. Reaching the front door, they yanked it open and tumbled out into the cold night. They didn't stop running until they were far from the house, their breaths ragged and their hearts racing. Gasping for air, they looked back at the Gardner house. The windows glowed with an eerie light, and the front door slowly creaked shut on its own. "We're never going back there," Lisa said, her voice firm despite her trembling hands. The others nodded in agreement, the terror of their experience etched into their minds. They knew that something evil resided in the Gardner house, something that had been waiting for them in the attic, and they knew they had barely escaped with their lives. For years to come, the friends would be haunted by the memories of that night. They would hear the whispers in their dreams, see the shadowy figure in their reflections, and feel the icy grip of fear whenever they thought of the Gardner house. They had uncovered the dark secret of the attic, but it had marked them forever, a reminder that some places are better left undisturbed.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling content.